Today, the topic we're talking about is releasing trauma imprints from the body. And this is, it's so fundamental to healing work. And I'll talk more about this as we get into the topic. If you're here with me live, please say hello. Feel free to ask questions. Lyriel is here moderating, so she's in charge of the chat. Without further ado, I know we're starting at a random time today, but this is the time that we're ready. So here we go. It's all perfect. Okay, so we're going to talk about releasing trauma imprints from the body and why this is such a fundamental part of your healing journey is because somatic release really allows us to complete a lot of the neurological, physiological responses that are incomplete, that are a result of trauma. Okay, so let me explain. So somatic means of the body. Okay, somatic work engages sensation, movement, breath, sound, posture, and nervous system responses rather than cognition or storytelling alone. So for those of you that are in coaching or therapy, or perhaps you're getting readings or, doing some type of intuitive processing, this is all wonderful work. It's really important to be able to share, to talk about what happened, to receive empathy for what happened, to tell the story of your life, and in order to come out of shame. This is such an fundamental first phase of the healing process, okay? But storytelling alone doesn't create release. It doesn't create transformation. Okay, so trauma, stress, grief, shock, and even long-term emotional suppression are stored as incomplete physiological responses, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, and so the nervous system learns to inhibit the expression of these in order to survive. Somatic release happens when the body is finally allowed to finish those interrupted responses. Okay, so there's three ways that human beings process emotion. There is repress and suppress, there's express, and there's escape. So we repress and suppress the emotions that are so big. For example, we can suppress something we don't want to feel. We just want to slough it under the rug. We're trying to avoid this discomfort, but we're conscious of it. We repress the trauma that's so big, we're not even conscious of what's actually happening. Okay, so there, you could have had a huge event in your life, a significant event. It can be a car accident, it can be physical abuse, it can be, feeling an experience of feeling threatened. Perhaps you were attacked or in some way, shape, or form experienced the trauma that created a shock in the body. And we don't have the awareness to fully sit and process it, especially without a guide. For those of us that are in those instances by ourselves, we're not processing the trauma. We're allowing it to form imprints in the body. Imprints are formed when the neurological expression, physiological expression are not complete. Okay, so there's an imprint that stays stored. And I talk about this all the time. I say everything that's ever happened to you in your life is stored in your cellular memory. This is what this means. Okay, so I can talk about what happened, but I haven't fully released it until I do the somatic work. Okay, so, and this is so important. That's part of the reason why, it's all the reason why. It's part of, I'll say, I'll correct myself, because in my inner work containers, I guide people to do 20 minutes a day of diaphragmatic breathing. And I do that for two reasons. The first reason is, to set the tone for the day, to engage in deep diaphragmatic breathing so we can cultivate presence, regulate the nervous system, allow suppressed emotions to unearth themselves, to present themselves, to be felt, to get used to feeling the full range of our emotions and learning to meet them with compassion and non-judgment. So there's a 20-minute, diaphragmatic breathing practice that you do that helps you ground, that helps you stay anchored in your body, helps you process, and so on. And then I guide the diaphragmatic breathing during an emotional release. So if we're doing some regression work, for example, going back into a memory, I'm a psychic medium, as you know, so I'm also doing channeling work during the regression. For example, I have a client I'm working with who has had traumatic amnesia. So she was sexually abused as a child, and had no memory of it, and had the physiological responses, stored in her body. The trauma was stored in her body. Through talk therapy, she was able to remember a lot of what happened to her. And in our work, we're actually using the channeling work to go back and fill in the gaps of some of those memories that are still foggy, taking her back into those instances, letting her, it's kind of like this is what regression work is going back on the timeline of your life, revisiting that event, and then doing the somatic release to actually let go of some, and of those patterns that she's holding on to in her body, and having that deep release. An emotional release is different than a physiological or somatic release, because and they go together, right? So we can release a lot of emotion during that somatic release, but emotional release doesn't interrupt the pattern in and of itself. We need the somatic work. Okay, this is so important, especially for those of us that have significant trauma. This is everything. Okay, so what actually gets released in somatic work is it's not abstract, it's patterns. So chronic muscular bracing, shallow or held breath, suppressed impulses to cry, to push things away. Like, for example, this client has, because she learned to dissociate at such an early stage in her life, she learned how to not feel, right? Not to feel the full range of her emotions. She doesn't let herself connect to her feelings. And so the somatic release allows us to actually experience our feelings again, our full authentic range of emotions. The nervous system steps out of freeze, out of flight. Again, the diaphragmatic breathing does this. Just simple belly breathing in the morning can help you regulate your nervous system and step out of fight or flight and move into relax and digest mode. Okay. So the diaphragmatic breathing in and of itself, without a container, without an intention to process something, is beneficial. In regression work, we have an intention and perhaps a container to go back into and really process a specific event in our lives. So you can do it both ways. You can do breath work, and there's so many different types of breath work. I like to facilitate the diaphragmatic breathing because it's accessible, it's easy, you can do it on your own, it's gentle, it's not forced breathing, so we're not trying to force a process. I'm a huge advocate for allowing the healing to unfold organically rather than trying to force ourselves into, processing something that we may not be fully psychologically ready for. Okay. So again, this facilitation method has a lot of integrity and it's very gentle. And there's also other ways to process and to do somatic release. There's pranayama breath, which there's 8 different types of pranayama breath work. Diaphragmatic breathing is just one of them. There's the Durga, there's Kalabati, there's all kinds of different pranayama breath work that we can do to help release trauma from the body. What somatic release does, again, we're using our breath to release things from the body. And it's more than just oxygenating the blood. What it does is it signals safety to the vagus nerve. It changes our CO2 tolerance, which directly affects our nervous system. And it restores rhythmic flow, which trauma disrupts. Okay. So, and it unlocks areas where breath was unconsciously restricted. Okay. So this is all so important. Somatic release is not catharsis for its own sake. You can go to a breathwork class and perhaps without an intention or guidance or a held container with someone who's done their own healing work, you can have a release without direction, and that can leave you feeling open and raw and very ungrounded. Okay. So, the deeper truth around somatic work is that it actually, what it does is that it allows the body to no longer feel like it's locked in the past or in protective patterns. So through the intuitive processing and the therapeutic work and the channeling work and the regression work, we engage in deep storytelling and remembering whatever the trauma was, being able to really revisit those parts that we've suppressed in our memory and in our body. And through the somatic work, now we can unlock these patterns and we can experience the flow of universal life force energy, the flow of love, your life force energy, chi energy moving through your body unobstructed. Okay. And this can help relieve physical pain, emotional pain, and mental stress as well. And it can help things like depression. It can help things like anxiety. All of the mood disorders are alleviated and softened, if you will, if not healed altogether, through deep somatic work. Okay. So basically, somatic release is the body remembering how to complete what it once had to suppress and return to regulation, fluidity, and awareness. Okay. So, again, the emotional release is often narrative based, right? Storytelling. So with the somatic work, we're able to actually complete that process on a physiological level. Okay. Somatic can happen without the story, without the talking. I like to engage in a container that sets an intention, that allows for a regression process, that allows for the deep receiving of empathy for what happened to you, so we can come out of shame. And then moving into the somatic work actually completes that process and allows us to heal deeply on a cellular level. For example, those of you that are familiar with my peace process, you've watched that video in my YouTube library, and I've posted it here as well. In the peace process, whenever we experience a reaction or a trigger, we sit with our uncomfortable emotions. We learn to breathe through them. We meet ourselves with compassion and non-judgment. We engage the deep diaphragmatic breathing. So it's a somatic process that we're doing while engaging the awareness and the understanding, the deeper understanding of what we experienced, why we experienced it, what are we feeling, how can we go deeper into these emotions. And the breath allows us to do that. So the breath allows us to go deep within ourselves, and it also allows us to cleanse and release that which is ready to be healed. Okay. And again, we do this in a gentle, organic way, allowing the body to intuitively know how deep it can go safely. Of course, we don't push or force ourselves. Okay. The somatic release is never meant to make you feel like overwhelmed or chaotic. That can happen sometimes, especially if you go to a breathwork class and you don't have a container, or you don't have a facilitator really setting a good intention to facilitate your release. Okay, so that can happen. You can feel chaotic. If that ever happens to you, you're in choice. You can stop. You don't have to continue. You can get up and walk away. You can ask for help. You can hold up your hand. You are in choice, of course, through all of these processes. I cannot emphasize that enough. Okay. So I want to talk about some of the effects of somatic release. We can shake, right? So shaking happens sometimes when we're doing the breath work. In fact, you can see it in dogs whenever there's a threat, or whenever they're shifting out of one experience into another, they'll shake their entire bodies. This is somatic release. And so the shaking helps bring movement and bring the expression of the energy. Okay, relieving the energy that you just felt. It helps accelerate the release of that. Okay, and it doesn't have to happen. It can appear as somatic release can appear as slow unwinding or stretching, or deep spontaneous sighs, or heat waves through the torso. There can just be tears without emotion. Okay, this is all the release of energy in the body. Okay, so again, what matters most in somatic work is rhythm, ease, responsiveness, and relationship to the sensation. Okay, and the breath is actually regulating the vagus tone, increases tolerance for sensation, softens protective bracing, and allows sensation to move without overwhelm. All right, so again, making sure that you have a container that has integrity, that you have a facilitator or a guide if you're new at this, that you're not trying to do this on your own. Okay. And once you've had the release, okay, now we need to integrate. This is the final phase. So in essence, somatic work, is essential to the healing process, but there's really three parts. There is the storytelling, the emotional release, the therapeutic process of engaging, of talking about what happened, so that we can unlock those memories in a safe container. The somatic work to help release the trauma imprints from the body. And then there is the integration phase, which is, equally as important. So integration looks like rest and hydration. It looks like simple movements, walking or stretching. It can look like, just moving slow and grounding, going and spending some time in nature, journaling, all, really just taking the time to sift and sort through your experience so that you're not rushing to analyze or to give it meaning, and allowing it to, again, always we always want to stay in alignment with nature. How does nature organically unfold? It moves very slow. It's never in a rush. And so when we stay in alignment with nature, we follow our own natural rhythms, our own natural impulses, which the somatic release helps restore, right? So the storytelling allows us to let go of the trauma of what happened, to talk about it, to come out of shame, to receive empathy and unconditional love, to learn to meet ourselves there. The somatic work allows us to really release it on a cellular level so we can ground and anchor in this new experience of the body, feeling more free, more at home, more in universal life flow energy moving through us. And then, of course, this awakens intuition. I mean, I can go on for days about this topic. It awakens intuition. It allows us to activate all of our clairs, and we can access the higher realms. We can really experience sensation beyond the five senses. So intuition and psychic work and channeling, as I mentioned. And now, in the integration process, we are anchored in this new experience of self. So think of it as a clearing process. We're clearing away everything that's not love, for example, or everything that's not peace, let's say, everything that's not peace. And we're integrating that experience, and then we're allowing ourselves to feel more embodied in that peace, and it becomes sustainable and anchored. It doesn't become like just a peak experience. You can go to a breathwork class, for example, or you can have a deep experience, therapeutic experience, transformational session with a coach or somebody, even in a psychic reading. I tell people this all the time, like, readings are great information. It's good guidance, but there's always deeper healing work to really shift what's happening for us on a cellular level so we can feel more free, more at home, and more at peace in our bodies and in our relationships and ultimately in life. Okay. Of course, this is my wish for you and all beings everywhere. Okay. So again, the benefit of these processes allows us to go deeper into our truth. It allows us to have choice. It allows us to restore our biological cycles. Okay. It releases survival energy that's held in the tissues. It returns the system to present time safety, and we're reclaiming agency from reflex. Okay. So we are actually claiming our sovereignty in the somatic work when we are engaging in this. Of course, as I mentioned, there's 3 parts to do this fully and completely. Make sure that you're integrating. Okay. This is so important. All right, beautiful. Thank you for hanging out with me, you guys. I hope this topic was helpful. So for those of you that have an opportunity to go back and watch, if you have any questions, this is a deep topic. And I kind of went through it, I kind of went through it very efficiently. I gave you a lot of information. But just remember that no healing process is complete without somatic work. Okay. We must engage in the storytelling phase, which is our ability to start talking about what happened to us so that we can come out of shame. This frees up some space in the mind, in the heart, and in the body, but it doesn't really, our nervous system and our biological responses don't really get restored until we do the somatic work, as I mentioned today. And then the integration phase, which is the final phase of really learning to now adapt to this space that we've created in our bodies, and have this be a new way of operating going forward. Okay, so I hope this topic was helpful, and thank you for hanging in with me. It's always a pleasure to teach here in this group. Thank you for being members, and I will see you all at Oracle Hour at 5 p.m. on Wednesday. All my love.